variables in Swift 3, or variables in any language for that matter. Variables are the fundamental building blocks of anything that you're going to create. They're little boxes, if you like, that hold bits of data or lots and lots of complex data. Let's see what they are by playing around with them inside of our playground. So in our playground, we've already got this import UI kit, and var str is equal to hello playground in quotes. Now, what this is doing is it's declaring a variable, and that variable is called str. That name of the variable can be almost anything you like, but my recommendation to you is to name it something sensible so when you look at your code later on, it makes sense and you know what it does just from the name. We have this other word called var. Var implies this is variable, i.e. it might change at some point in the future. Then we have an assignment operator, which is equals. This takes the right-hand side and puts it into the left-hand side of the variable. So, hello playground gets put into str. There are quotes there because this is a string, and a string is essentially a sentence or a phrase, or just a collection of characters like numbers and letters. Now, what if I wanted to put something else inside str? Well, I've already declared it, and I've declared it by saying var str. So if I want to put something else in it, all I have to do now is reference it by typing str is equal to whatever I want to put in it. So now str holds the value of Grant, and it has dumped hello playground. It's important to know in programming there is no undo. So if you do that, you cannot go back. Okay, so we have a var, but what if I wanted to make that str unchangeable? Let's say I'm working on a team of programmers and I don't want anyone to change the value of str. I want them to get an error when they even try to do it. Well, we can assign a let constant. And a let, let me just put that in, str, and let me just delete all of this, is equal to hello playground. What let says is you cannot change this constant once you've assigned it the first time. That is why we are now getting a red error here. It tells us you cannot assign to value str because it's let. It's constant, it is unchangeable. In reality, you're not going to use let that often, but when you start working in teams, it is a very good idea to do that. So, let me just remove this str and change this back to var str is equal to hello playground. At the moment, Swift is inferring the type. It knows that when we put things inside of these quotes, that we're actually declaring a string. But sometimes this won't be so obvious to Swift. So we have to explicitly say. And the way we explicitly say what type of variable it is by popping in a colon and then typing the type. In this case, it is a string. Okay, now what if I wanted to store a number? Well, I would remove this line and I would put, let's say, number 8 in. And I'm going to get an error. And it tells me that I cannot convert value of type int to specified type string. And that just is fancy words for, hey man, you can't put a number inside of a string. So we're going to change this type, let's call this mynum, to an integer. And an integer is simply a whole number, like 8, 9, 10, 1, 2. An integer cannot hold any value that has a decimal, like 1.1. If you try to do that, in most cases, at best, it'll just drop the point part. At worst, you'll get some kind of crash. So how do you store decimals? Well, the one you should go for by default is called a double. and we can have double 8, 6, or any number of characters after that, or numbers. Now look at this, very interesting. Over on the right-hand side, it's told us that our value is this long one, even though we haven't typed that. And that's because double has a fixed number of decimal points, something like 15, I believe, if I'm not wrong. So there are always going to be very small, very slight errors inside of programming. And if you're making something like a complex maths app, you need to be aware of that. Right, what about other kinds of numbers? Well, we can have what's called a float. And a float is like a double, but it has fewer accurate decimal points in accuracy. And the difference between floats and doubles is you'd use a float when accuracy isn't essential. There are some other reasons we choose between the two, but we won't go into that now. The final variable type I want to show you is called a Boolean. A Boolean holds true or false. So var my bool of type Boolean is equal to true. Or this can be equal to false. So Booleans are incredibly useful for keeping track of, whether things are turned on or off, or whether your user is touching the screen or not. All of these cases have true or false embedded into them, and you're going to use Booleans a lot in the logic of all your apps. So those are some of the basic types of variables inside of Swift 3. I'm not going to run through all of them, obviously, because we'll be here for about 5 days. But once you know how to declare them and what they're used for and where to put them, then you should be good to go when it comes to learning more complex types.